There's a reason that divide and conquer is a thing. When you have individuals on a team that don't work together, you're never going to be able to win. So let's take a look at the Battle of Little Bighorn. Much has been written and said about this battle, but let's look at the Battle of Little Bighorn through a different lens, the lens of leadership. And there is a ton that we can learn as leaders from this battle, extract those lessons and apply them directly to our world. The battle takes place in the heat of summer, June 1876, on the Great Plains of Montana. The U.S. government signed a treaty in 1868 that gave the Lakotas a huge amount of land in what was their traditional homeland. And as U.S. settlers started to move into those areas across the frontier, particularly when gold was discovered in the Black Hills, the U.S. government sent troops to try to keep settlers out, and they were unable to. And frankly, that would have been a highly unpopular decision. And what the Grant administration decided to do was to try to get these tribes, like the Lakotas, to cede some of the land that they had given over, like the Black Hills, to the U.S. government and force them onto reservations. And when the Lakotas and other tribes like the Cheyenne refused to do that, the Grant administration sent the U.S. military to try to round these tribes up and force them onto reservations. One of the U.S. military leaders tasked to lead this mission to capture these Native American tribes and force them onto reservations is named Colonel George Armstrong Custer. He was a decorated Civil War hero, and he was now out on the frontier trying to accomplish this mission of forcing these tribes onto reservations. The other leader in this story is a powerful Lakota chief and medicine man named Sitting Bull. Sitting Bull did not want to accept the treaty and lead his people onto reservations. He wanted to continue his traditional nomadic way of life on the Great Plains. Custer's goal was to capture the Lakotas under Sitting Bull's leadership, who refused to go onto the reservation. And his main concern was that these Native Americans may actually escape before his cavalry units could actually surround them and capture them. So Custer sets out with about 650 troops. He had mostly cavalrymen, but he also had about 30 Native American scouts from the Crow and Arikara tribes that were part of his expedition, and he also had about a dozen civilians with him as well. They're trying to locate this group of Native Americans somewhere out on the Great Plains that are out there hiding. And what they think is that there's about 800 or so members of the Lakota Nation that are out there. What they don't realize is that Sitting Bull has put out a call to all of the Lakotas to come and join him for the summer buffalo hunt. And so hundreds of Lakotas have left the reservation to come and join with Sitting Bull's band, and that they have allied themselves with other Native American tribes like the Cheyenne and the Arapahoes. So this group that he's trying to locate is actually thousands of Native Americans from multiple tribes. And on the morning of June 25th, 1876, Custer scouts up on a piece of high ground called the Crow's Nest see a dust cloud from miles away, and they know that that is probably the Lakota pony herd. And so they feel like they have located the village. They tell Custer that it's the biggest pony herd that they've ever seen. And Custer's chief concern is that the Lakota may actually escape and get away before they can be surrounded and captured by Custer's men. So Custer takes his team, he breaks off the pack train that are moving with the mules that are carrying the supplies and the ammunition for his team, and he says, hey, you guys catch up with us later, we're gonna move forward. So Custer moves forward with his cavalrymen on horseback, moving as light as they can, as fast as they can, and they ride forward to try to capture this village before they can escape. And the first lesson I want to talk about is splitting forces and putting teams in situations where when you divide up the team and they can't actually support each other and work as a team, that sets your team up for failure. This is a concept at Echelon Front that we call cover and move. It is our first law of combat. And what cover and move means is it's all about teamwork. The individuals on the teams and the smaller teams within the greater organization have to see themselves as a team. They have to work together. They have to mutually support one another in order to accomplish a goal. And if they don't do that, if they don't work together, if they don't support each other and they undermine each other, that team is never going to be successful. Custer splits his forces a second time and sends his second in command, Major Marcus Reno, with about 140 troops to attack the southern part of the village. Meanwhile, Custer takes about 210 troops and moves around to the northern portion of the village and says that where he's gonna meet Reno in the middle. So now he's got his forces that are split into 3 separate groups. And what's interesting is when you visit the battlefield, it is very deceiving. As you stand out on these hilltops, you can see for miles in all directions, and yet you can't see beyond the hilltop just a few hundred yards ahead of you. And as Custer and his men split up and disappear beyond the next ridgeline, they can't see each other and they can't support each other. And they don't know where each other are, and they have no ability to know what's going on, and so they lose the ability to actually support one another. In the military, we call this supporting distance, and Custer's men are split up and they can't actually see each other and they can't actually support one another. So Reno takes his men, attacks the southern end of the village, quickly realizes that he is vastly outnumbered and he's almost overrun and nearly surrounded, and all that he and his men can do is fall back across the Little Bighorn River, climb a high hilltop, and form a defensive perimeter on top of that hill. And it's all that they can do to beat back the Native American attacks from these hundreds and then thousands of warriors that are attacking them, and it's all they can do to not be overrun and killed. Meanwhile, Custer takes his men, moves forward, and tries to attack the village from the north. And at some point, he sees the village and realizes that he is vastly outnumbered. He sends a message back to his pack train, says, "Bring ammunition, come quick." He realizes that not having every bullet that he could possibly have is a huge mistake, and he's gonna need that. So as the pack train gets the message, they move forward to link up with Custer, but they first encounter Reno and his men in this defensive perimeter on the hilltop. Reno says, "You can't move forward. We need your bullets. We need your guns here. We need all the help that we can possibly get." So the pack train joins Reno's men. They hunker down and become part of his defensive perimeter. Meanwhile, Custer's men, they're located miles to the north. They're surrounded, they're in trouble, and they're waiting for help, but that help is never gonna come. Because even as Reno's men heard gunfire and knew that Custer was probably in trouble, they moved forward to a high hilltop. They were able to see Custer's men miles ahead, but at the same time, they also can see thousands of Lakota and Cheyenne warriors that are maneuvering to attack their position, and they're forced to fall back to Reno's defensive perimeter, and it's all that they can do to hold out and keep from being overrun. Custer and his men are cut off. They have no help coming. They have no ammunition resupply, and they're surrounded, and all 210 men that are with him are killed. Meanwhile, Reno and his men back in the defensive perimeter, they don't know what's happened to Custer. And in Reno's mind, he feels like Custer has abandoned them, has run off to try to capture the Native American tribes, and has left them without support. And he didn't learn until 2 days later that Custer and all of his men had been killed. And this is an example of what happens when a team doesn't work together. When a team doesn't mutually support one another, when a team spreads themselves out in a way that they don't know what the other teams are doing. They can't actually see the other teams, they can't communicate with the other teams, and they actually can't support one another. That is the violation of our first law of combat, cover and move. For any team that wants to be successful, every member of that team has to recognize that they have to work together as a team. They have to mutually support one another. The teams within the overall organization have to work together, mutually support one another in order to accomplish the goal. And that didn't happen at Little Bighorn when Custer split his forces up and they were unable to see each other or support each other. You can't let that happen to your team. It's easy to look at the lessons of history. It's easy to look at a leader like Custer and say, he shouldn't have split his forces. That wasn't a good call, and that's why the outcome was so catastrophic for his team. But how easy is it for any of us to fall into the same category? When you get focused on your tasks, your obstacles, the problems that you're encountering, the frustrations that you're dealing with, and you forget about other people on your team. You forget about other teams that you're supposed to be supporting, you're supposed to be helping. How easy is it to lose sight on what they're doing? When you can't actually see them, when you don't actually communicate with them, when you don't actually build relationships with the other people that you actually have to work alongside and that you depend on to be successful. And they depend on you in order for the entire team to be successful. That is why cover and move is the first law of combat. Everything is about working together as a team. And to summarize cover and move, it really just means it's not about you. It's not about your individual team. that you're a part of. It's about the overall team and the overall mission that you're trying to accomplish. And when you can stop focusing on just the things in front of you, just your tasks, just your challenges, just your frustrations and problems, and start to focus on how you can better support others, you're gonna build better relationships, you're gonna better support others, they're gonna better support you, and you're gonna create a team that is absolutely unstoppable. That's the power of Cover and Move.